Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 35 of Untold Evidence. On the night of the 1st of February 1959, in the northern Ural Mountains, 9 experienced Soviet hikers cut their way out of their own tent. They were partly dressed, several wore only socks, some had no shoes on. The temperature outside was approximately minus 25 degrees Celsius. 9 sets of footprints led down the slope from the tent, and then they stopped. By the time the bodies were found, some had died of hypothermia, others had died of injuries consistent with the force of a car crash. One hiker, Ludmila Dubunina, was missing her tongue, her eyes, and parts of her face. This is known as the Dyatlov Pass incident. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old radio engineer student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. The other members included several other Russians, 8 men, 2 women, all experienced. Soviet hiking culture in the 1950s was rigorous. The group was certified for difficult winter expeditions. They were not amateurs. A 10th hiker, Yuri Yudin, left the group early due to back pain, and he was the only one to survive. The group set out from a settlement called Vizhai on the 27th of January 1959. Their goal was a peak called Untold. When the group failed to send their expected telegram on the 12th of February, families began to worry. A rescue party was dispatched on the 20th of February. The first thing the searchers found was the tent. It had been cut open from the inside, sliced with knives. Most of the group's belongings, including their boots, their warm clothes, their food, and their map, were still inside. Whatever caused them to leave the tent happened so urgently they left without their boots. A trail of footprints led down the slope. The footprints suggested the hikers had walked, not run. Some prints were barefoot, some showed only socks. The first 2 bodies were found around a small fire, approximately 1.5 kilometers from the tent. These 2 bodies died from hypothermia. 3 more bodies were found between the fire and the tent. All 3 appeared to have been trying to return to the tent. The remaining 4 bodies were not found until early May 1959, buried under approximately 4 meters of snow within a ravine. This is where the case becomes unusual. The 5 bodies found in February showed signs of hypothermia, some bruising, defense injuries consistent with disorientation. The 4 bodies found in May showed something different. One had a fractured skull, one had been crushed in the chest. The pathologist's assessment, documented in the Soviet investigation file, was that the force required to produce these injuries was equivalent to the impact of a car crash. Here's the unusual part though, the injuries were internal. There was no significant external injuries, no damage to the skin where the skin had been struck. The investigator later wrote he could not identify any conventional mechanism that would produce internal crushing force without leaving external marks. In addition, one of the bodies was found with portions of soft tissue missing, specifically the tongue, the eyes, and sections of facial skin, as well as part of their lips. 2 other bodies also showed varying degrees of soft tissue loss. So in March 1959, the Soviet investigators ordered radiological testing on the recovered clothing. The results, which were declassified decades later, showed elevated levels of beta radiation on samples of 2 of the hikers' clothing. Specifically, the sweater of one showed beta radiation approximately twice the natural background. Well, that's not catastrophic, it's not lethal, but it is, however, anomalous. There is no natural source of beta radiation at that altitude in that part of the world. The case was officially closed in 1959. The cause of death was recorded as a compelling natural force which the hikers were unable to overcome. But that's not a cause of death. That's the absence of one. Fast forward to July 2020, 61 years after the incident had occurred, the Office of Russian Prosecutor General reopened the case. After a fresh investigation, the prosecutor reached a formal conclusion. The case, according to the 2020 ruling, a slab avalanche, a specific kind of avalanche in which a layer of compacted snow separates from the underlying snow and slides downhill as a single mass. The argument runs as follows. During the night, a slab avalanche developed above the tent. The hikers cut their way out to escape the immediate threat. In the dark, cold, and disorientated, they then walked downhill. The blunt force injuries were the product of being struck by the moving snow. In 2021, researchers at ETH Zurich and a Polytechnic University published a peer-reviewed paper in the journal Communications, Earth and Environment. Using physical simulations of a slab avalanche dynamic, modelled in part on the same software used to animate the snow effects in the film Frozen, the authors agreed that the injury patterns and timings were consistent with a small, delayed slab avalanche. This is the most credible scientific account currently on record. It is not, however, the end of the story. So here's what the slab avalanche hypothesis does explain. The forced exit from the tent, the blunt force injuries, the lack of external bruising, consistent with being struck through a layer of clothing by snow rather than rock, the barefoot retreat, panicking extreme cold, and the deaths from hypothermia downhill. But here's what it doesn't fully explain. The radiation on the clothing, the specific pattern of soft tissue loss, the relatively mild disturbance of the snow surface above the tent when the investigators arrived 2.5 weeks later. The radiation finding has been variously explained as exposure of radioactive industrial materials at the institute where the hikers were previously worked. The soft tissue loss is most plausibly explained by the post-mortem scavenging by small animals and the decomposition in moving water. One body was found in a stream bed. Each individual anomaly has at least one credible conventional explanation. What is harder is having to invoke a different conventional explanation for each separate anomaly. At some point, we have to ask the question, can a single underlying cause have 5 different related outcomes? So here is where this incident actually sits. The Russian government in 2020 concluded the case was a slab avalanche. Peer-reviewed Western science in 2021 supported the conclusion in a physical simulation. The injuries were explained, the behaviour is explained, the deaths are explained. But what is not fully explained is the radiation and the specific patterns of tissue loss, and the strange detail that 9 experienced hikers in the middle of the night in 25 below zero cut their way out of the tent from the inside so quickly they didn't even stop to put their boots on. The official Russian conclusion is the most rigorous one available. It is also the case that more than 60 years after the deaths, researchers, families, and a small but persistent community of investigators continue to ask questions that the official record does not fully resolve. Sometimes the most truthful answer to a mystery is that the explanation is probably correct, and probably is not the same as the known one. Names matter, records matter. If you found this episode useful and entertaining, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.